Welcome, everyone. I am Elizabeth or Betsy Hawley. A little bit about me, I'm a non-native art historian of modern and contemporary art, as well as art of the Americas. Currently in a visiting assistant professor position in the art and design department at Northeastern University. And as Abby said, I curated Native Feminisms, which I developed after the show proposal was selected from the last New York open call. So if any of you are considering submitting a proposal for the international call that Abby just mentioned, I guess I have two words for you, which are to do it. It's been a really wonderful experience working with Abby and everyone else at Apex Art. This afternoon, I am zooming in from Philadelphia, as is Sheldon, coincidentally. Different locations, but both here in Philly. And we want to recognize that both this location and the physical location of Apex Art's gallery in Manhattan are on the ancestral homelands of the Lenape Hoking. And we honor Lenape past, present, and future, and express our appreciation for this land and their caretaking of it. A little bit about the exhibition, Native Feminisms. It seeks to showcase the aesthetic richness and political power of artworks produced by contemporary Native North American artists whose practices address sort of intersectional issues of feminisms and indigeneity and underscore the discursive potential of Native feminisms and highlighting works produced by artists who are all too often left out of or tokenized in contemporary gallery spaces, among other spaces. And the pieces on view in the show consider a wide range of concerns, including things like decolonization efforts, Indigenous women's rights, historically and in our own era, the significance of elders and their protection, feminine or female aesthetic traditions, Indigenous futurisms, and of particular salience in the work of Sheldon Raymore, customs of gender fluidity and ongoing problems of violence against Native women and Two-Spirits. And I'll turn now to a brief introduction of Sheldon Raymore, who is a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux Nation and is currently the Deputy Director of the American Indian Community House in New York. He uses his art practice to address contemporary and traditional Native American topics, approaching his subject matter with love, passion, and the honoring of his indigeneity. Raymore is an interdisciplinary and activist artist, variously incorporating an almost countless number of different mediums and categories. I'm going to list a few of them here: video, music, dance, poetry, costume design, regalia design, stage props, set design, and masks. Sheldon, I'm not sure if you sleep, considering that list of things that you are doing. And he uses these in the production of works that promote social change. His art alludes to triumphs and tribulations present throughout Lakota histories, including intergenerational trauma, land loss and violation, tremendous spiritual responsibilities in being Two-Spirit, and Lakota culture's remarkable resilience and indestructible roots that Raymore intentionally and meticulously preserves for the next 7 generations to come. So Sheldon, thank you so much for being with us here today to further explain the nuances of Two-Spirit Tipi. And Ryan, if you would, could we put up the piece on the Zoom call here so we have the visual? All right, so thank you again, Sheldon. In our backdrop here, we have, this is Two-Spirit Tipi. This is the piece Sheldon made for the exhibition Native Feminisms. And then in the video that I hope you all had a chance to watch, Sheldon gives a kind of performative storytelling account of the piece and the histories behind it, and its reference to contemporary concerns. And we are going to talk a little bit more about that, hear from Sheldon about that here today. So Sheldon, the video really underscores your position as a Lakota storyteller and an artist, and I'm hoping that you can speak with us a little bit about what it means to be a storyteller in your culture and how you yourself became a storyteller.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming into today's event. It's an honor to be here. And I've begun storytelling actually because I had family members. First of all, I was privileged enough to have my grandparents that were fluid. They spoke the language, the Lakota language. And so I had those knowledge and wisdom keepers that I lived with in my home. And so they would share stories about the old days, when we like from the 1800s. And so also going back, I graduated on my reservation at the Cheyenne Eagle Butte High School, which is on the Cheyenne River Reservation in South Dakota. And when I went back there, I learned a lot of our creation stories. And so I was mentored by many different people. I can't name just a single one. My grandmother, Zelda Swift Cloud, my Lala, my grandfather, Major Brings Plenty, and many, many more. I have uncles and aunties, and many stories were gifted to me. And so being in that environment around in my home, just hearing all these different stories and learning the language, and then even the stories within the Lakota language, that inspired me to continue this way of wisdom keeping. And it was the way of means to do that was actually through storytelling. And so for me, I began storytelling by just reciting back these stories that were told to me, that were gifted to me by all my mentors. And I do that to the younger generations because that's our way of passing on this oral history and the oral tradition of storytelling. So to me, storytellers, they really recount historical events that were really prominent or even not so prominent. And everyone has their own gifted way in which they tell them. So.
Great, thank you. And I think we really see the aesthetic of your storytelling coming out in pieces like Two-Spirit Tipi. And considering the title of this event, as well as your piece in the show here, I'd like to bring up the way that you mentioned the specific Lakota term "winkte" in the video, which references someone assigned the male gender at birth, who later takes on female community roles after the female spirit within kills the male spirit, as you again describe in the video. So in your view, can you speak a little bit about the differences between the very culturally specific term, or a term like winkte with this long history, and then the more recent term Two-Spirit, which was not adopted until the 1990s, and a broader term, a more recent term, having to do with conceptions of Indigenous, gender fluidity or gender variance, and how you sort of hold both of these terms, use both of these terms, and I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it to you here.
Well, the term winkte, I used to hear all the time. I was called winkte often growing up. And it was a term that I learned from a very young age. I was I was just different from the other boys. And so, I was told the story of other winktes growing up. And I learned the word and what that word means. Wiya is woman and kte is to be killed by woman. So it translates to killed by woman. And then that's where I was also told the story of how that term came about. And so from a young age, I knew the term winkte, and I knew it was culturally specific to my tribe specifically. And so when I for many, many years, I sort of, when I came out first as gay. I was the first two-spirit in my family. But I had to learn about two-spirit. I didn't know about two-spirit, about anything about two-spirits until I was way older, probably in my 30s. And then it was something that I understood was since there's many different nations, tribal nations, they all had their different words for their gender fluid, gender variant individuals that were within their nations. And so Two-Spirit became a way of uniting, sort of like a united tribes term. It's a pan-Indigenous term. It's a way of us identifying ourselves at different Native-specific cultural events and gatherings. So, you know, since 1990, it's been amazing to see. I was not there at that first gathering when the term was coined. The term before that was berdash, which was an offensive term, and it didn't honor the female two-spirits. So this was a way of uniting all of our people together under that umbrella term, Two-Spirit.
And we see an image of a Winkte figure on the piece on Two-Spirit Tipi here in the lower register, and it's as we've had in, you know, we've discussed in previous conversations, this is an image that comes from, it's a sort of updated image, but derives from a historical figure found on a winter count of a Winkte figure on a winter count. And I'm wondering if you will, you know, for those who may not be as familiar with winter counts, explain what winter counts are and the, you know, the significance of these winter counts and the significance as well of seeing Winkte figures on some of them.
This specific winter count comes from a Chief American horse, and it was actually the year 1848 to 1849. And Chief American horse was a count keeper, and this was one of the images that he drew on his winter counts to document this specific event that happened that year. But a winter count is a pictorial image that is used to symbolize a specific period in time and history in our Lakota history, but also other tribes in amongst the plains do this this way of recording history. And so it's like a history book is the best way I could describe it. And so the count keeper was responsible to know the story of what happened in that year. So sort of what they would do is they would observe children at a young age that could retain, that had good memory, that could retain a lot of information. And sort of like how we send our children to school today would be the same way these children were told all these different stories so that they could retain all this information, and the count would be passed on. The Winter Count Society, there was a older men's society called the Big Bellies, and they used to be the ones who would come together a lot of times to pick what that year they were going to call it, and then therefore then they would draw their image to what would symbolize that year. And it wasn't always the most important event. It could have just been the most memorable event amongst the people, the family. We say Tioshpaye. And so they would use this image as a means of storytelling and recounting this image amongst the people. During this time we're living in right now is winter time. So a lot of times, you know, the snow gets really high up in the Dakotas and it gets really cold. And so they would come together and during teepee circles and different, you know, visitings and different celebrations and times, and they would share these stories with the common people to say, you know, special stories. So there's a lot of significance to these winter counts. And as a younger artist, I wanted to continue on this tradition. There are a handful of modern day count keepers. And so this is an art form that I took on as a means to keep these histories alive so that they don't pass on. And if we don't use them, we lose them. And specifically, I just want to add, I also, me and Betsy, we shared the same winter count that we know about, which is the year the stars fell. And the Smithsonian has a great, they had a great online exhibit, and it used to document all these winter counts. That's what first inspired me to learn about this, because I'd never seen a winter count that was mentioning the word even wink day. And when I did more history when I learned more of the history of this specific winter count, you know, it said that there was 700 horses that were stolen by the Crow Indians from the Dakotas. And so in retaliation, they killed the war party, and they found this individual who they thought was a woman. And they found out she was, some say they hermaphrodite, some say half man, half woman. The interpretations are various. And so they when they found this out, you know, they had killed her. We don't know if they killed her because of that reason. We don't, but regardless, they still call her a wink day, which this also shows that there were various tribes that held this position of being, we say today, Two-Spirit, because that individual was a Crow Indian, you know, and the Crows have their own word for their Two-Spirit people. So, and you'll notice she's wearing a dress here, and you'll notice they identify she has a penis, but also more in looking in this, you'll see a blow to the front of the individual, and she has an arrow that she was shot with there, but also you'll see she has blood on her head. And so if there's any questions afterwards, you can let me know and I can explain a little bit more about this.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, actually, that was going to be my follow-up question, the red that we see. So it is blood indicating the violence and how this weekday figure person was killed. And of course, the red of what we would assume to be a kind of wound here is echoed by the red of the handprint that we see in the figure above. And in your video, you really underscore the staggering rates of violence enacted against Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirits. Again, I'm thinking of the hand that you see here at the mouth of this figure in Two-Spirit Tipi, which is a symbol of those fighting for missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirits, or MMIWGT. Could you speak a little bit about how this violence is connected to the violence of colonization, which I think is something that really comes out in the video performance?
This, the handprint is a symbol that many Indigenous people we're using today to raise awareness of this epidemic that's going on in across Turtle Island. We say the United States, Canada, everywhere on this Turtle Island. And so for me, it's a very personal issue. I've lost a grandmother to murder, and we never found who killed her. I've lost an aunt who was murdered as well, and I've lost a cousin. And you know, I think about the next generation. Why does this continue to happen? There's things that are going on in today's world after colonization. Also, why are there hate crimes on reservations? Why are there hate crimes out of reservations? Why are Indigenous people constantly being affected by violence in various ways? And so I felt it very important to incorporate this, to raise awareness and do my part as best as I could, as best as I can, to to bring attention to this. And there are, it is an epidemic that's going on right now. And, you know, I think that, again, as individuals, we have to do our part to not only raise awareness, but start thinking about um, what can we do about it? You know, it's like we can go to the legal systems and they'll do so much for so long, and then it becomes a cold case. And that's really disturbing to me, because I think about all those families and all the friends and relatives and communities that are affected by this, by one individual, and the sacredness of individuals, you know, as women, men, two spirits, girls, young, you know, it's just very disturbing. And so I wanted to highlight this uh, violence that happens.
And the handprint itself, of course, it is on the face of this this figure, and that, you know, in Two-Spirit Tipi and in the associated video storytelling performance, you appear as your, I'm going to say alter ego, and correct me if that's incorrect terminology, but your alter ego PrEPahHontoz. And can you tell us a little bit about PrEPahHontoz and her work, and why it was important for you to include her in Two-Spirit Tipi?
You could say alter ego. She's a diva. No, I'm kidding. But I think that for PrEPahHontoz specifically, I am she's the current National Native AIDS Prevention Center's awareness ambassador. And so that's a role that usually would only be given to maybe a woman. And they gave it to me as a two-spirit, and they gave it to, and when I present as her, I present as PrEPahHontoz. And the word PrEPahHontoz came because of the work that that she does in the HIV field. That's around the country, and actually all the way to Amsterdam. And so the being on PrEP and actually it's just a pre-exposure prophylaxis medication to prevent HIV. But part of prevention is also treatment. And so I think that the work that PrEPahHontoz does is really to raise awareness, to bring a Native voice to a lot of, I would go to a lot of conferences and there would be hardly any Native representation. And it's like we were silenced, and it's like we were forgotten about. And so I use PrEPahHontoz as a way of raising awareness. And again, like I said, bringing that Native voice through performance art, also through my visual art. This is actually the first piece that I've done where I've incorporated her into one of my art pieces. That is a visual art piece. And so that's the work that she does across, like I said, Turtle Island. She goes to a lot of conferences and does a lot of, right now we're working on some more projects that'll be coming out in the future. But also the symbolism here, that she's on a teepee, and the teepee symbolizes community. The teepee symbolizes family. It symbolizes the home. And it's so powerful to have her on here, because that is my female side that I honor, and I honor her, and I'm very respectful when I am her, and I make sure to carry myself in a nice way, to be good representation, you know, to be a role model. And so those are all values that I was brought up with, and I maintain through PrEPahHontoz. It's some of the performance artists like voguing, Native American Sign Language, with meets like pop or dance music. And then so we'll see. She keeps evolving as an artist. I feel like that's what we do. We continue to grow. We continue to learn. I do not know everything, but you know, I'm always open to learning more.
Yeah, there are some really fantastic PrEPahHontoz music videos available on YouTube, right? Where those who are interested can go and take a look, and I encourage you to do that. I'm wondering too, do you see connections between AIDS, HIV, and its effects on Indigenous communities, with connections between this and earlier epidemics of diseases like smallpox and cholera that really devastated Native cultures, and that you reference in a timeline in the video portion of Two-Spirit Tipi? Do you see a linkage there?
Yeah, the linkage that I see is that we are not just surviving these epidemics, but we're thriving through them, and we're still here as Indigenous people. These epidemics affected us greatly. We're going through one right now in the pandemic. We're being greatly affected by it across the country and across the world. And I'm sure there's other Indigenous communities that are in other countries that are going through things too. And so it's important to continue to not just survive, but we're gonna thrive through it, and we'll get through this. And I think it's I think these past epidemics, the present epidemics, they're just connected in a sense, you know, past, present, future. We don't know where the future will lead us to. But the times that we're living in right now, I think everybody can relate. And the hardships that we're going through right now during this time, they went through those a long time ago too. And this is why a long time ago, even your eating utensils, when you went over to somebody else's teepee, you would bring your own, you know, and you would use your own. And as a mean, you know, so they had to go and they had to live their lives in a way to get through and survive those epidemics. So, you know, I think that if there's a takeaway today would be just that, you know, that we will get through this.
And let's turn back to some of the aesthetics coming out of this piece and the video. There's such a sort of vast cosmic quality to certainly the video. I think you see it in the physical piece, Two-Spirit Tipi. I think it's replicated in your Zoom background right now, which is fantastic. And then, of course, Two-Spirit Tipi here, it includes this beaded sun and moon figure. Could you speak a little bit about the significance of these sort of cosmic entities in your work, in this piece and perhaps in others?
The sun and the moon, they created time. And I've always felt that as two spirits, we're sort of that in between, the male and the female, and we hold that space, and it's on a spectrum. And I think I relate that sort of to the dawn or the dusk within a day. And so you have daylight, which with the sun, and it's a male energy, and the moon at night, and she's female, and then the two spirits sort of hold this middle ground, this middle space, which is a changings of times and maybe changes of genders. And so that's what's represented in this teepee. And I did incorporate some quill work, porcupine quill work in it, which is a really old art form before beads were brought over from Europe. And I found the stars you'll see are really the cosmos, and all those cosmos. And in our traditional Lakota belief system, when you pass on to the spirit world, you go back to the stars, and you go back with the star nation. And so I found it very important to again, you know, missing and murdered Indigenous women, two spirits, and girls and two spirits is a really tough thing to go through. And you know, I wanted to highlight that, you know, that they go back to the stars as hard as this is. Even the edging of the fringes that you see on the bottom with that, that represents the sort of the blood from the red dresses that are being used a lot today to raise awareness for the MMIW movement. And so again, even the teepee cover in itself represents a woman's dress, a female dress. For Two-Spirit people a long time ago, specifically Winkte, the very act of putting on the opposite gender's clothing was the statement, saying that you are Winkte, or vice versa, Wichakte, which is Wichasha is man and Kte is killed by man. So though there were not only Winkte, but there was Wichakte as well. And so I found it really just showing keeping balance between these two genders. The Winkte, that was one of the roles that they were counselors, they were matchmakers, and but they also kept balance, and they were allowed to go back between these two camps or two groups, two genders. And so it's really that fluidity that you're seeing there.
You've already spoken a little bit about the significance of this, of the teepee and the shape here, the using the teepee format. And this Two-Spirit Tipi it's the latest, I think the latest in a series of these miniature teepee covers that you have produced. So can I ask as well, how did you come to this format? And would you tell us a little bit about your process in making them?
I was privileged enough to live with my father and mother. They were both artists in their own way. I was gifted the dance, powwow dancing through my mother, and was gifted teepee making through my father. My father used to make miniature teepees, and growing up, I would watch him make these beautiful teepees. He would make teepee lamps. They'd be about 3 feet tall, and all the work that he put into these, all the time and weeks of painting, and one by one, and I would watch him paint his buffaloes, and it was so beautiful, and it inspired me, and I always wanted to sort of keep that tradition going, keep his work going through our family. And it was something that just I naturally had a calling to do, and I wanted to do. And so finally I got to a creative headspace to where I could start making these within the last couple of years. And something just drew me to the teepee and the cover specifically. And so my process really is, I obviously, I have to think of a concept before I start. So I usually will like sketch out what it is and what it is I want to say. I always think about what do I want people to take away from this. So I'll oftentimes will write things out, so I really think oftentimes of as a sort of a package, with these. I'd like to storytell with them, and I'd like them to speak to the viewer, and hopefully they take something positive or good away from it. And that's really my process.
And is this an ongoing process? Do you envision, can we expect more of these mini teepees in the future?
Absolutely. Yes, I will be coming up with, again, more concepts. And as an artist, we walk through we put one foot in front of the other, and you walk through this life in this world today. And, there's things that'll happen to you. And one way is getting that out, like I said before, is just through my art. And so, life will go on. As long as I live, I will continue to make these. And here, I also just wanted to highlight that I used dentalium shells. I used porcupine quills. I used paint. I hand drew a lot of this. And I used the glass cut beads and of course the leather stain to get the red fringes and the red that represents the very bottom of it. And oftentimes I'll use leather paints as well. this was painted on deer hide.
Well, I see that it is now 4:10, and I do want to make sure that we have plenty of time for audience questions. So Abby, I think I may turn things over to you here.
Wonderful, yes, and here's our chance to kind of turn over to our audience who has joined us today. Your chance to either put your name in the chat or to type out a question, and we'll do our best to add. So I'll give everyone, a few moments to jump on the chat and let us know.
And as we're waiting for some chats to roll in, some questions to roll in, I know from experience sometimes it takes a while to type them out. Sheldon, can I ask, you were just speaking a bit about the beadwork that you include on Two-Spirit Tipi, and I see that you are also wearing right now some incredible beadwork. Is there a connection there? Do you make your own beaded designs in terms of jewelry?
When I have time, I do. It depends. Just depends on it. Sometimes if I'm doing a visual art piece, a performance art, I will make myself sit down and take the time and actually produce it, because it is very time consuming. It is, you're doing one bead at a time or every 2 beads and then going through one. And so if you can imagine, it's very tedious work. So I always give respect out to other Native artists too that are jewelry makers. What I'm wearing is were gifts that were given to me by actually all Two-Spirit. Well, except my choker was made by my uncle, Stephen Brings Plenty, and so this was gifted to me at the Bates Powwow, which is coming up. If you get a chance, check it out. It's online. It's the Bay Area American Indian Two-Spirit Society Powwow. It's the first public Two-Spirit powwow in the country, actually in the world. And so they do this powwow every year, which is really great. Which, if you want to know more about it, I could tell you about it. But so my jewelry, that's basically where I get it from. I support other Native artisans, and I love jewelry. So if you're a Native artist and you make jewelry, reach out to me. I'll support you.
Wonderful. We do have a question on the chat from Mary. Sheldon, could you please explain what a teepee cover is?
Yeah, a teepee cover would be we were a nomadic people, and we would follow the buffalo and move to our different camps, summer camp, winter camp. And being nomadic, the teepee structure specifically, when we moved on to the plains, because we moved onto the plains and developed the teepee itself. So first you put up the wooden structure, which is with the lodge poles, and they're very tall, and you put those together, and you put those together in a cone shaped, and then you would take the teepee cover and you would cover that as a dress. And so that's when I said earlier about the woman's dress. The teepee cover would then go around like a mother's arms around that teepee structure. And so it would be closed together with all the lacing pins. And so I guess takeaway would be that it is, again, the home, but it was also the woman's domain. And that's where, the woman, she loved her family, and it was the home, and that was her domain, and that respect that was given to her. And teepee covers can be very heavy, especially if they're made of buffalo hides. I've seen some traditional teepees where they were made of buffalo hides, and they're very, very heavy. And they took about like maybe 7 or 8 buffaloes to be sewn together to actually make that hide. So nowadays, a lot of teepees you'll see, contemporary teepees will be made of canvas. But in my case here, I tend to like to work with deer leather, just because I like well, first of all, I like the smell of it, but also I enjoy just working. It's very easy to work with.
Wonderful, thank you. And we have a question from Victoria Hunt. Victoria, do you want to go ahead and unmute?
Danse, Nitzigasan Mo Clark. Victoria's my partner, and she invited me to this event, so I'm posing as her. Kananas Komten, Sheldon, thank you so much. I'm a Two-Spirit Métis from north of the Medicine Line, originally from Treaty 7, Alberta, but I live in Montreal in Jojage, and I'm actually working on a master's thesis proposal this weekend around Two-Spirit, like identity and performance. And I'm a singer-songwriter, and I'm wondering, you know, you speak about coming from a traditional upbringing and really having those teachings as a child growing up. And, you know, I work a lot with youth and a lot of youth in urban environments who are quite disconnected from traditional teachings and community in that way. And I'm just wondering, how do you navigate, you know, sometimes more binary imposed spaces such as like ceremony, powwow? How do you place yourself, and what sort of advice or suggestions would you have for Two-Spirit youth coming into those environments as a way to keep themselves safe?
Mhm. I would say that it was, well, first I want to answer your, I guess, kind of first question, but in a way, just so you know, my family, I'm actually a first generation off the reservation. My mother left the reservation and they'd lived there their whole lives and generations before. And so here was my mother with, you know, came to a city and had to learn to adapt in a city. And then I was born in a city. So that being that generation, we were growing up in a city, but yet we were around a lot of the culture, and you know, we would seek out. We moved to the Bay Area. That's where I was born, in Fremont, California, and we moved to San Jose. And so we would go to the Indian Center, and you know, we would be around all these different tribes of people, and so for the culture was there in that sense, and we would go to powwows and but to answer your other question, I would say it's been a journey, like I said, and you have to kind of know where safe spaces are and where they're created for the youth. I think that in today's generations, they're so lucky, the youth now, because there's so many Two-Spirit societies out there, all across Turtle Island. There is community, whether even now, since we're all you know, basically online, you know, interacting with each other virtually. There are Two-Spirit groups out there that they can go on their different social media platforms. I tend to use Facebook a lot, but you know, I know the younger generations, they use all these different things that I don't even know what they are. So, but I would just say through social media, you can find community, you can find connections. And what I was speaking to earlier, even the Two-Spirit powwow, which is happening at Bates, that powwow degenders their dances. And now that I've seen, there's actually more powwows that are coming up where they've degendered the dance categories, and they allow the individuals to express how they want to express through their dancing, whatever dance style that they want to. And that's normally not the case at powwows, regular powwows. And so oftentimes I just sort of feel out my surroundings. But oftentimes when I've gone to powwows, I end up finding a Two-Spirit table. And so again, that's the point of connection when we get back to going into powwows again. So I would suggest just going online, looking at different groups, and also when we do start up powwows again, definitely going and checking those out, and also the Two-Spirit gatherings that happen all over Turtle Island, attending them.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll also just quickly note here, if this is of interest, and I assume it is if you're working on a master's proposal, if this bias, sort of binary bias within ceremony is something you're thinking about, you might also take a look at the work of Jolene Ninaba-Yazi, who is also included in the Native Feminisms exhibition. She's Diné and also of Apache and White Mountain Apache and Comanche descent. And she dances in the men's northern traditional category at powwows, and has really received a lot of pushback and bullying for that activity. So she's worth checking out as well.
Yeah, there's still a lot of work that we have to do. I wouldn't say we live in a perfect world, you know, and these are different times, and we are treated differently now than we used to be. So there's still more work to do, more work to be done.
Is the Bay Area powwow, is the Two-Spirit powwow, the base powwow, going to be online?
It is actually this year.
Awesome.
It is a virtual powwow, and you can go to their website. It's going to be streamed live on their website. It's BAATS, so it's Bates, Bay Area American Two-Spirit Society, Bay Area American Indian Two-Spirit Society.
Brilliant. Yeah. Hi.
I think I found the link and I put it in the chat there, so everyone can visit to learn more. We have a couple more questions coming in, which is wonderful. Thanks everyone for submitting. We have a synced up question from Amanda and Elizabeth, both asking Sheldon about the symbolism of the crosses, the two white and the red cross on the teepee cover.
Yeah, those crosses are Lakota symbol for the stars, and so those are. There's one that I put for the morning star, and that's the one on the right up there, and then there's the one I put there. If there's a red cross of porcupine quillwork, which is representing the sort of that transition into the spirit world. And that's what that on the moon side, the cross with the red inside of it. So those are stars. Those represent the different stars. Star symbols, I should say.
Beautiful. And we have a question from Ekate, who says, what are some of the ways that non-Native allies can support Two-Spirit people and Native women who are being subjected to continued violence? Also a comment, your work is beautiful and thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Well, thank you. I would say there's a lot of things that you can do. There are, first of all, you could help us raise awareness about this. I know the Savannah's Act is being passed, which is great. So it's great when we go from not just protesting, but to then change policy. To, you know, policy changes. So I think that those can be really great. But the raising awareness and helping us do that, it's so important, because this seems to be a silent epidemic that's happening. You know, why are Indigenous women Two-Spirit, you know, why are they being sometimes sex trafficked? You know, or why is there drug cartels that are going on, you know, and that there's all this violence that's happening out there. So I would definitely say help us raise awareness for this. And anytime that there is sort of an event, we're always looking for support in that. You know, when we get back to being able to you know, attend events, look at the different events that we have going on, and I continue to learn and start asking questions. You know, what are the rates in your own communities? What does this look like? You know, what's going on here? It, like I said, when it affects you so personal, you are, as a family member, you are left with this question mark. And it's a missing piece in your heart that you just can't, you can't fill.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question, and we have one more question, so that works out quite well. From Billy, and I'm going to read aloud what they sent in the chat. Thank you for sharing your work, Sheldon. Have you made other videos to accompany other Tipi works? They're wondering if the video is meant as a digital parallel of the story on the Tipi, or if the video serves as a proxy for you, the storyteller, when you can't be present with the artwork.
I would say it's probably both. I do have one other video out there about the Tipi project that we did. It was at the American Indian Community House, and we were gifted data from the Indian Health Services, and we had our artists come together as a collective, and we put a call out to community, and we developed these winter count drawings, you know, through their own artist interpretations of what information they were being given. And we developed our own winter counts on this teepee, which is 30 years of HIV/AIDS history and its effects on Native Americans. And it was, we were also gifted, I like to say, by Dr. Thomas Hawkes Red Owl. I really look up to his work because he was one of the first people to actually do a winter count about the HIV/AIDS, its effect on the Sioux people. And so it's actually from that winter count, there's two of his counts that he gifted to the project, and they're on that piece too. So it's the, you can look it up, it's on the PrEPahHontoz Tipi project. And it's also on my website, which is sheldonraymore.com. And so you'll see all those different winter counts that were placed on there. We made a 10-foot size teepee, but I've also made some of these miniature covers that you're seeing here on this, like in this size of this teepee.
Wonderful. And we did have one more question come in, and we do have a few more minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and ask. From Mackenzie, to go off of the earlier question about kind of what you can do, they're asking, what can a social service worker who works in mental health and addiction do to help support and care for those who are experiencing violence or have lost someone due to violence? If you have, you know, recommendations or resources.
I definitely think that I can only speak from the side of being a family member, is how do we deal with this, with the grief and with the loss of our loved one? And I think that you don't know what to do. You know, you don't know how to deal with this sometimes. And I think in mental health, that's really important to be able to present something to these families that are going through this. And substance and working in substance abuse, maybe sometimes family members turn to substances. So how again, not knowing how to cope with these this issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women, I think it'd be nice to have, I don't have any resources to share with you right this moment. We're, as a family, I know we're working on my family, we're trying to find out what can we do as a family to sort of mourn, but also like healthy ways to mourn, but also like ways to cope with this issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. I think that's pretty much all I can really say to you, because even me, myself, as a family member, I don't even know what to do or how to cope with this. And that's why I use my art as a means of maybe expressing or maybe trying to heal from it. But it always feels still like an unanswered question that always is lingering. And so how do we, how do we have some medicine or good advice on how to move forward?